Kia ora koutou. So I have the great privilege of working for our place, Te Papa. And Te Papa also has another meaning, which is the treasure box, or the holder of treasures. So it is a pretty incredible place to work at a treasure box where we hold the nation's treasures, those objects, but also those people. I work for Mahuki, so it is where culture meets business, meets innovation. We are about creating new ways of telling our stories through technology. That could be AR, VR, holograms, who knows, but new ways of retaining and growing our audiences. But we're also about solutions that will help us run our business better. There are 75,000 museums in the world with over 1 billion visitors visiting them. We are complex businesses. And so we have a big need for solutions that will help us with that as well. But it's pretty incredible to work in an organisation where actually culture is so much a part of it. I mean, culture in all its forms. So we've coined a term, culture tech. So we are about commercial impact, social impact, but also cultural impact. And that means culture as in the culture and heritage sector, but also as in all of us and our cultures. I wanted to briefly share some personal insights. The first one is last year was a big leadership year for me, and I kept being asked all these questions about what shaped me as a leader. The first one was contributed to a book, and they said, well, Tui, what was your greatest influence? And I thought about it a while, and I said, actually the greatest influence on me in being a leader is that I was born in New Zealand. I thought this is where I could say, being Māori, being a woman, being a single parent, all of these things, but actually being born in this country, which I believe is the nation of possibility, is what really has made it happen. I just had the opportunity to come back from overseas, and the opportunities here are extensive, and it's possible to come from really humble beginnings and go on to lead our country. So that to me is one of the first principles. I think that we should really honour and cherish that. Secondly, and around that, being born in New Zealand, I come tribally from a very small part of the country called Mahia. And actually things are not so great in Mahia. We have a bit of rural land. We wondered, what could ever change to make things better for me and my family when actually, what we own is this little piece of land. And suddenly someone popped up and decided that they would shoot rockets from there. And we were going, who on earth would ever have thought that would ever happen? We certainly didn't. Now we actually are landowners, but we think there's some shady things that have gone on, not from the rocket people, but possibly from our own family. And it might not ever result in anything, right? But and there are things that we have to think about for the future. I don't know environmentally how it's going to go. It's started to raise the house prices in Mahia. But what really inspires me is that someone had that thought that New Zealand could be a world leader in shooting commercial rockets, and that's inspiring. The third one is that I also applied for a leadership scholarship last year, and one of the things was, what has shaped you as a leader? And again, this is where I thought I'm going to write my big essay. It was a women's leadership program, so this is where I should really talk about women and gender and all of that sort of jazz. And I went, actually, what is the truth for me is what has really shaped my leadership is something that we don't talk about much, and it's growing up poor. And actually growing up poor and not having a lot of money and the deep shame that comes with that is actually what has really led me to the leadership things that I do today. And also it's led me to my commitment to actually supporting other minority groups like in our program. Because with that, when as a young person, I looked around and I could see my Māori family, and my Māori family were poor and disadvantaged, but my Pākehā family were not. And so for a very long time, I also had those two things combined. And I was like, well, actually, that deep shame, poverty, that's my Māori side. It took me quite a long time in my life to actually, separate those out. And but the thing is, what really is great about talking about it now is that now it's actually, we're doing something about it, and I love what you guys were talking about. Actually, it's not just about creating wealth for our country, it's actually let's create wealth that actually disseminates through everyone, because actually that's what's really important. And there are a number of decisions you can make, right, growing up poor, right? Actually, some of my friends made decisions that actually it's really cool. It's kind of ghetto, right? I never saw it that way. I was like, I don't want to be the cool. I want to be rich. I want to be, well, not so much I want to be rich, but I want to be in control of my destiny. So I certainly could have made some decisions along the way of like, okay, I will accept this, or I can be hard done by. And I went, well, actually, this is the reality I come from, but it's not the reality that I want for my future or for my child. And the funny thing is, but now I'm thinking, gee, I wish he just knew what it was like, this is my son, to know what it's like to grow up poor, because actually then he'd understand a little bit more about why I make him do things. The last thing is that I have just recently got off the plane from an amazing trip to Hong Kong and Singapore, and I was thinking about this talk, and I thought, I want to talk about red dot leadership. So red dot leadership came from a tour that we did with this amazing guide through the Singapore Discovery Centre. And he said, we are the red dot nation. I mean, what does that mean? He goes, we're the little country underneath that red dot. And he goes, and they talk about it, and they talk about it with that wonderful sense of humility and confidence that comes from that, right? And I thought, well, actually New Zealand is so much bigger than that physically, but actually we're kind of a red dot. And sometimes when you are a minority, you're kind of a red dot. You are behind that red dot. But actually, Singapore is punching way above its weight. 5.75 million people, fifth largest financial market, aiming to grow to 7 million by 2030. But at the same time, dealing with all of the growing pains that come with that kind of growth. And I was really inspired. But further, this particular Discovery Centre is funded by the Ministry of Defence. And so all school children go through the Discovery Centre. And it's really interesting when you think about a museum environment, they only have a certain amount of space to tell their story. And so it's interesting to see what are the stories that they've selected that are important to that culture. And there were 4 principles that they had up, and they were also what I'd like to end on as principles for thinking about leadership. The first one is, and when I say these, just think for yourself, what it means that an organisation is. This is the messages they want to give to their kids, right? The first one is no one owes us a living. And traditionally as a trading port, now Singapore is an international market, but they have to import all of their food. They have to compete, with all the other countries. They have to face some hard truths. But what they're instilling in their people is that no one owes you a living. And I kind of feel that way too, having come from the background that I come from. No one's owed me a living. I've created my living for myself. The second one is we must ensure that we preserve racial and religious harmony. So as a nation that was quite separate, racial groupings, then coming together to then ensure that they all got on with one another, especially because they're in the place, physically the size of Lake Taupo, right? So what does that mean for us as individuals and for New Zealand? Making sure that we embrace diversity, but also that we get on with one another. Thirdly, which I think had probably the defence bent, was around we must always ensure that we ourselves defend Singapore. So actually their role and also, defending their values, their country. But then lastly, which is the message I leave you with, was that we must also always uphold meritocracy and incorruptibility. They're pretty big words for school kids, right? But I love that. The first one, actually succeeding on merit, succeeding no matter where you've come from, what your background is, and then second, ensuring that actually we continue to provide those equal opportunities for all. So, looks like I've got, I'm finished. Okay, I was going to go on, but thank you.